Hello, America. More than 5 years ago, I started warning Americans about the unsustainable path that our government was leading us down under George W. Bush. Again, I told you 3 years ago, and every economic expert laughed me off. Everybody's still talking about signs of our recovery, but today history was made because the thing that would never ever happen took place. The S&P just lowered a U.S. outlook to negative. What does that mean? Well, it used to be stable because America was a stable country. If you go out and get your credit card and you're paying, let's say, 12% interest, and you start to look unstable, you look like you can't pay your bills. Do they raise or lower your interest rates? Does it make it easier or harder for you to get a loan? This is what happened to our country today that everyone has said to me for the last 3 years can never happen. I said it would happen when George Bush was in office. You could only see it coming because it's there. It's the way math is math. I remember having the discussion with you in 2007 about ethanol. 2007, I asked you, how is burning our food supply a good idea? I predicted at the time that we would be hated around the world because people would starve to death so we could have fuel for our cars. Again, I was a fearmonger. At the bottom of the hour, I want the media to report on the fearmongering of the head of the World Bank, who now says we are one world shock away, like an earthquake in Japan, from a global crisis and food prices skyrocketing. And they are skyrocketing. Food prices, let me show you this. Remember, they said last fall, don't listen to Glenn Beck. He's telling you crazy things like store food. Food prices in the last 30 days have gone up almost 1%. Coffee in a year has gone up 3.5%. In a year, meat 7%. Dairy 15% in 30 days. Wheat 3 times, gone up 3 times in 2 years. Corn 100% increase in 6 months. Don't listen to crazy people telling you maybe you should have a little extra on hand. The 912 Super Seniors, we asked them right before Christmas, will you please just go in, because they're telling you no inflation exists. Well, how is that possible? So will you please go into the grocery stores? Well, here's what they found. The price since the 21st of December last year, ground beef has gone up 11% in your grocery store. 6.6% increase in milk. And cheese, 12%. Now, all 3 of these have something in common. Cows. What do cows eat? Corn. What are we burning now in our cars? Corn. Now, who in their right mind, when this is going on, would burn corn? But yet, when you ask the soundness of drilling, and the drilling moratorium in the Gulf, and the president's policies making it more and more difficult for oil companies to resume drilling, anyone in favor of drilling vilified for agreeing with the evil profiteers of big oil. Since it's tax day, let's just look at the evil profiteers, shall we? What's the profit margin of Apple? Because everybody on the left loves Apple. How much, when you buy an iPad, how much do they make? According to, what is it, Computer World, it's 42.9%. Oil companies, when you buy gasoline, how much is their profit margin? Apple has got to be less evil. What is it, 80%? 90% profit margin? No. Less than 8%. So how come we're not taxing Apple? Why are we vilifying Apple instead? Because this doesn't fit their agenda. Now, Middle East is on fire, right? Who would have seen that coming? Oil prices skyrocketing. Is there anybody who, if you look at things honestly, that doesn't think opening up drilling at home might help a little bit? Speaking of the Middle East on fire, the media celebrated the sudden love for democracy. Journalists and the administration basically had a makeout session with Al Jazeera. Food or fuel? What's it gonna be? You're gonna have corn, which feeds people and animals, which gives us beef, chicken, pork, milk, cheese, and eggs? Or are we gonna take this corn and instead take a lot of this corn and go down here and make gas, which is heat and transportation, air, land, and sea? But oil does all of this, and plastics, clothing, pesticides, medicines, machines, all that stuff. No. Let's start getting rid of some of this stuff, some of these, maybe even some of these, and divert some of it just for our cars. I wonder what Al Jazeera would say. Politico is reporting the Emir of Qatar came by the Oval Office today. He owns Al Jazeera, basically. Today, when he visits the White House, officials tell him they watch Al Jazeera English to monitor the protest. At the State Department, when you go down the hallway, you see Al Jazeera virtually on every TV and computer. Oh. Isn't this the Al Jazeera? Is it the same Al Jazeera that just like 3 years ago we said was an enemy of the state? My, how far they've come in a short period of time. Merely by asking the question, what does democracy look like in the Middle East, resulted in ridicule and scorn. Well, how's that democracy working out? What's it look like? Yes, chaos. Which brings us back to food and fuel. The average national price of regular gasoline, how much is it? $3.83. By the way, the highest ever recorded average for regular was under the evil George W. Bush. Now, let me ask you this. Bring it back to the irregular price, please. There it is. Do you think, Price is Right, that number is going to go higher or lower? What do you think? We're entering the summer months. It always goes higher. And the Middle East is on fire. So what happens? What happens to our food prices with the transportation and the heat? What happens to our food prices coupled with the fact that we're using more corn? Look, gang, it's not going to get any better, and the Saudis that we have become dependent on are not pumping any more oil. In fact, the Saudis said today that they're going to reduce the amount they are pumping by 800,000 barrels because they say there's a world surplus. I know, it's only $3.83 a gallon. And more regulations are coming your way. Thank you, Cass Sunstein. Do your own homework. Do your own homework. Red State's reporting today, and you can bet that it's got Cass Sunstein's fingerprints all over it, that the ATF is now seeking to limit firearms based on their definitions of what is appropriate for sporting use. I didn't even think that sporting use was even a consideration for the Second Amendment. Firearms for sporting. Who would have seen that one coming when the Bill of Rights was written, huh? Republicans and Democrats, the politicians and the media assured the public, assured me. I even had a Republican senator tell me, oh, this guy, oh, he's a man of his word. When we said he wants to control Americans like little lab rats, they said, no, this is what he said at school. Ow. Cass Sunstein wants to change the definition of what firearms you can carry based on the definition of what is acceptable for sporting use. Now, I wasn't alive in 1776, but I'm pretty sure the founders weren't crafting the Second Amendment based on their love of clay pigeon shooting. But maybe it's just me. Because I see America a little differently than the way, Cass Sunstein does and the president does. The president sees the Constitution as a charter of negative liberties. And he wants one of positive liberties. Well, let me show you the difference of negative and positive liberties. He sees the Constitution this way. I see it this way. Negative charter. A handcuff on the government, not on you. The government can never take away your free speech. They can never, ever do anything to the media. They cannot stop your worship of God. The Second Amendment is the right to own a gun. Protect yourself against who? Clay pigeons? No. An oppressive government, and don't start with well, they got tanks. Yeah, and they will roll over you. Positive charter. This is what he wants to change it to. First, limited speech. No hate, no conspiracy theories. No, we've got to watch that speech. There's got to be something in the Constitution. The government-funded media. We should all just watch Al Jazeera, as Hillary Clinton said, because there's no commercials on it. And my favorite, there's not people arguing all the time. Oh, well, that's our problem. People are arguing because they have differences of opinion. She's so smart. And, of course, a positive charter for the Constitution would say you can worship God any way you want, unless... ... We've been lulled into a deep, deep sleep for a long time. Nancy Pelosi said last week, the Republicans have got to get control of their party. I love this, because we share values. Watch.
My Republican friend, take back your party so that it doesn't matter so much who wins the election, because we have shared values about, again, the education of our children, the growth of our economy, how we defend our country, have security and civil liberties, how we respect our seniors.
Okay, she said she didn't want an election. Elections shouldn't matter that much. That is weird, because that's what Edward Bernays said. Oh my gosh, and I think George Bernard Shaw said that as well. All the big progressives said, oh, the people can vote, but it shouldn't make that much of a difference. That's great. I don't know about you, we don't have shared values. If you see the Constitution as a positive charter, I don't have anything in common with you. I'm sorry. I see it this way. Now, we can still love each other, but Hillary Clinton will cry, because then there'll be people who are disagreeing on television, and then they'll have to break for a commercial. When Nancy Pelosi cried on television, she cried over rhetoric. You remember? I've seen this kind of stuff before, and it scares me. What she was talking about were the 1960s, the rhetoric of the left. It ended in horror shows, as it always does. Jim Jones drinking Kool-Aid. Remember that one? Oh, yeah, that worked out well. He was a communist. Did you know that? The shooting of Harvey Milk. Yeah. He was shot by a Democrat. Did you know that? So, yes, Nancy has seen it before. But if she's so sincere, well, where is she now? Where are the others that were so sincere about Gabrielle Giffords? Why aren't they talking about what happened this weekend? Well, I'll tell you why. Because the government and much of the media has the same. They have the shared values, you see. Where is NBC and CBS and CNN on the thugs all across the country just this weekend? It wasn't too long ago that none of us believed the things that we do now. I remember holding up this book on television. This is from the July 1st, 2009. People called me crazy. I said at the time, this book is about the coming insurrection, and it would happen in Europe. And it did, and the unrest continues there. I said that it would happen in the Middle East, and it did, and the unrest continues there. I said that it would happen in America, and it did, and the unrest is only getting started. Since we last met, 10 days ago? Here is what has happened. Leftists were out in protest over the weekend in Madison, Wisconsin. The AFL-CIO union thugs actually booed the playing of the national anthem. Here it is. You'd be safer at a Philadelphia Eagles game dressed as Santa. At the very same event, a 14-year-old girl, 14 years old, giving a speech when union thugs started saying things like this.
think a 13-year-old girl, they said, who's speaking right now on the big screen, and this is how this guy's responding.
Do your homework, you spoiled little brat. You can't drive this license when you tell me what to do. Right here, honey. Change your problem. Go back to your room. Get on a nice train.
Do we have shared values, America? Do we have shared values? Why isn't that leading the evening news tonight? Are we Americans or are we turning into monsters? How about in Oregon, where the leftist union thugs staged an anti-Tea Party protest? Listen to what this guy's saying he wants to do with the American flag, and he does it every day.
With the flag every night.
Do we have shared values, Nancy Pelosi? Do we? Where is the media on some of the most anti-Semitic things I have ever heard? These just in the last few days. Let's start with Louis Farrakhan. Watch this.
Here's the President of the United States. His flight, his plane stops in Las Vegas. And the little Jewish mayor wouldn't even come out to greet him. How you gonna greet a president? Yes, I use the word because that's the way they think. You're nothing to them.
This man draws crowds of 18,000 people. Is he not worth pointing out? Is this not worth standing up against? Then there's this posted in Vanity Fair. This was posted Friday night at 5:45 while this broadcast was still on the air, doing an hour special on Israel. Vanity Fair wrote, his guests are Pastor John Hagee, the portly apocalypto preacher man, Dory Gold, the ambassador to the United States from Israel, Dory Gold, notable Israeli bore, and an American rabbi whose name I'll jot down the moment he says something interesting. It was hatred. But I don't think it should be banned. I think it should just be pointed out. And I'm wondering if the gaggle of George Soros groups are going to line up to take out attack ads on the gentleman that wrote it. Again, just recapping the things that have happened since we last met. Bill Ayers did an interview, which in it he again clearly states he does not regret bombing the Pentagon and other government targets. Here he is.
Let's just take it from the top then. Do you regret setting those bombs?
Not at all. And the reason
You
is
don't.
no one was hurt, no one was killed, property was destroyed. Meanwhile, every week that the war went on, 6,000 people were killed. Weather Underground indeed did take responsibility for a handful, maybe a dozen, extreme acts of vandalism. That's true. That's true. And so compared to what was going on every day in Vietnam, including the illegal bombing of cities, which John McCain took part in, and he is, of course, a war criminal.
Okay. Extreme acts of vandalism. He's defining a 1970 pipe bomb in San Francisco, attributed to the group killing one police officer and severely hurting another. That's just an extreme act of vandalism. An accidental 1970 explosion in Greenwich Village in a townhouse killed 3 radicals. Just extreme vandalism. That's it. 1981, an armed robbery of Brink's armored truck that involved Weather Underground members killing Kathy Boudin, David Gilbert, and 2 police officers, and a Brinks guard were killed. But those are just extreme acts of vandalism. It was the war, you know, in 1981. This man currently writes books for your children. He's teaching, or was teaching, at a college. Now he's working on the anti-Israeli flotilla. And you tell me that I'm just talking to a boring rabbi and a known Israeli bore about Israel being set up. Well, let me ask you, Nancy, do we have shared values? Do we have shared values? I don't think so anymore. More in a second. Well, Van Jones is in the news again. He was at the Power Shift conference this weekend that nobody seems to want to cover. This is the event where last time Van Jones gave this super classic quote. Here it is. You know it. You love it.
No more broken treaties. No more broken treaties. Give them the wealth. Give them the wealth.
Give them the dignity. Give them the respect.
Now, if you just think this is just another insignificant group, think again. Green for All, Van Jones' organization was there. Al Gore was there. Even President Obama spoke there, I think, during videotape. But I know for sure he met with the leaders of this group in the Roosevelt Room. Look at that. You know what that is? That's the room where the cabinet meets. Except remember the political person, the Democrat, who says he's not meeting with the cabinet? They haven't even seen him? Of course not. This is his cabinet. The president is into redistribution of wealth. We know that. He said that to Joe the plumber on the campaign trail. He also told Charlie Gibson he would raise the capital gains tax out of fairness during a campaign debate. That's cap and trade, the green economy. It's nothing more than massive redistribution of wealth. It's in disguise, not a very good disguise, but still it's a disguise. And now they are going after the youth because they can't get it past you. Listen to how Van Jones addressed this young crowd over the weekend.
When you go home, shift the power at the Thanksgiving table. When your Uncle Joe, who loves Fox News, starts talking to you and starts dominating the discussion.
I will tell you this, in a side note, that is why I am leaving this network. This network has this audience cornered. You are here because they're telling you the truth. We have got to get to our youth. Listen to what he is saying. Don't listen to the elders in your family. You teach them. Well, Al Gore has done exactly the same thing. Listen.
There are some things about our world that you know that older people don't know.
That was not the first time that he said that to people, to ignore your parents. Before Obama's inauguration, he was speaking to kids. Here it is.
When I was very young, a young teenager, and young people asked their parents in that era, explain to me again why it's okay to have legal discrimination on the basis of skin color. Okay. And when they could not answer that moral question coming straight from the conscience of young people, that's when the laws began to change.
Okay. These two sound bites were clipped. That was from this weekend. The other was during the Obama administration. They are telling our kids. You have major leaders now telling our children not to listen to their parents, to teach the parents. And you have to show the picture of the president and his cabinet room, the Roosevelt Room. This room is right across the hallway through the door, right behind the president. Right here is the Oval Office. This is where the cabinet meets or doesn't meet, as it is in the case with the President of the United States currently. The more things change, you see, the more they stay the same. These radicals are the same radicals that used to tell each other in the 1960s, don't trust anybody over 30. Don't trust your parents. Bill Ayers said, kill the parents. Kill your parents. That's what he said in the 1960s. Now they're just saying, don't trust your parents. Don't trust them. Don't listen to them. Teach them. Teach them. Don't listen to anyone over 30. Don't trust anyone over 30 unless it's us. And did you notice that Al Gore referred to the environmental rights as the same thing as civil rights? The left seems to think that everybody is a civil and human right. Internet, cable TV, food without trans fats, you name it, it's a civil right now.
Step from health care as a privilege to health care as an inalienable right of every single American citizen.
I offered a starting point for that vision by calling for a global commitment to internet freedom to protect human rights online as we do offline. It's a struggle for human rights, it's a struggle for human freedom, and it's a struggle for human dignity.
I believe health care is a civil right.
Is health care in America a privilege, a right, or a responsibility? Privilege, right, and responsibility.
Well, start with that. I think it should be a right for every American.
Okay, this goes back here, the Constitution. The Constitution says what the government cannot do, but they are changing it, and they are changing it bit by bit. into what the government must do. Must have high-speed internet. Must have this. Must have that. I think this is insulting to the memory of Martin Luther King and all who marched with him. It's insulting to the actual civil rights movement. Collective bargaining is the same? People were being killed, discriminated against, and hung because of the color of their skin. Had nothing to do with anything but the color of their skin. And you're equating that with salary negotiations? Wow. How? Well, the media. How do you get away with it? How do you sleep at night? I know there is one person that would agree with all of these things being a civil right, and let me play Van Jones again because he said it here.
When you go home, shift the power at the Thanksgiving table. When your Uncle Joe, who loves Fox News,
Uncle Joe.
starts talking to you.
Stop. Uncle Joe. Except it's not the one that liked Fox News. The Uncle Joe that I'm remembering, well, a long time ago, referred to as Uncle Joe, was Uncle Joe Stalin. Joe Stalin, our government, we needed him as an ally. And so they tried to make him into Uncle Joe. It's funny because it's almost like the people in our government, again, are using Uncle Joe, because Uncle Joe would completely understand and support all of those basic civil rights. Hello, America. I'm glad you're here. Thank you so much for tuning in today. The average price of a gallon of gas now is $3.83. I want to show you a chart here of gas prices to see how gas prices have gone up and down in the last couple of years. If you look here back at September 2005, this is where Katrina hit. You'll notice that Katrina hit and everything was relatively okay with the oil production. It wiped out 25% of our oil production, 10 to 15% refinery capacity, but then it was an event, it was over, and so we could get back to normal. Then we had some problems. In the summer of 2006, we had refinery issues. Some were shut down because of the hurricane damage, while others were, had to install and upgrade equipment to meet the new gasoline regulations. So, Hurricane Katrina and gasoline regulations. Then we hit the 2007 period, and here's summer again. Remember, we also hit summer and it automatically goes up. Summer of 2007, there was a series of refinery problems, a fire at a Chevron site, mechanical problems at some sites in California, but don't worry about that. Let's not build any new refineries. That doesn't mean anything. Summer 2008, this goes through the refinery problem, then summer 2008. This is where everybody was standing at the oil pumps and saying, you got to elect a Republican. And then what happened? Then we had speculation. Oil inventories were lower than normal. Market speculation didn't help. This is the period right now where the market is starting to collapse. This is the TARP area right here. And this is where the Pentagon said somebody was playing games. Well, it couldn't have anything to do with oil, huh? $145 a barrel in July. It comes down. The president is elected. Here's the market crash. Here we are. Look at this. The whole average is higher. Look at that. It never goes down to the peak. He is elected and never goes down. Now it goes on. Now here's Egypt. Now the Middle East unrest is happening, and look at it go up. When it hits this is 412. When it hits 412, remember what happened. Look at this. What do you think is going to happen? When it comes to gas, you must ask yourself these questions. Is it getting better or worse in the Middle East? Is it becoming the Middle East more or less stable? What do you think? Are we depending on us at all? Meaning, are we exploring and exploiting our own resources? And are we making friends that can help? Are we making any alliances with any rich nations? Well, let's start with the top question. Is the Middle East becoming more or less stable? What do you think? Things are worse in the Middle East. Libya is in the middle of a civil war now. Egypt is turning to Islamic extremism. Who saw that one coming? There is strife in Syria, Yemen, Bahrain. Algeria, of course, Israel is under constant attack from its neighbors, including Iran. The United States, who was revealed, is now involved in Syria and the unrest there. No, not a problem. Not a problem. Is it going to get better or worse this summer? Now, question number 2, are we exploring our own resources? Are we looking for it? No. In fact, the EPA say we are now hiring more people because they can't keep up with the new Gulf regulations. Cass Sunstein. We should be opening every conceivable option for oil. The Gulf, Alaska, new reserves found in Montana, Wyoming, South Dakota, offshore, Florida, California. As much oil as we have in shale in Utah and Colorado. We have so much shale, we have as much shale as Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, Venezuela, Nigeria, Kuwait, Libya, Angola, Algeria, Indonesia, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates combined. With that, we also have enough coal to power our nation for centuries, not decades, centuries. We could also be developing nuclear power, but no, that's too dangerous. The other are too dirty. So we do nothing. The president gives a speech and wants to put 1 million more electric cars on the road. Well, could you bring that chart back up here again? Guess what? Because electric is generated by something. Something. Is it coal? Is it gas? What is it? We're reducing our coal, the president says, when he lays his plan out, that it will make the electricity prices necessarily skyrocket. So what are we doing? Remember, when this gets up to here, look what happened last time. Are we more stable or less stable as a country? Are we making alliances with other countries? No. No. Quite the opposite. We've just managed to anger Saudi Arabia. And you know what's really neat? The right leader, Le Pen in France, she could face President Sarkozy in next year's election. Recent polls have her edging him out 23-21 of the vote. Le Pen said that if she wins, she's going to leave NATO and she'll make a new alliance with Russia. Oh, why? Because of energy security interests. Basically, they need oil, and they are making friends with the Russians for it. What Reagan said would happen is now happening. They built a pipeline, Russia did, and Russia controls the oil, the spigot, and the power of the world is shifting. So what a surprise that France is the first to tuck its tail between its legs and go running to Mother Russia. We must be making some friends, right? Well, we are. We're making friends with Brazil, the country that just elected a Marxist guerrilla who spent time in prison for trying to overthrow the government. She's leading the country that we wrote a check, you and me, $2 billion for Petrobras, corporate welfare. It was this week last year that the BP oil rig exploded in the Gulf of Mexico, causing the White House to shut down deep-sea drilling. But we gave Petrobras the approval to have the first deep-water floating production storage facility there. Not to an American, but to the Brazilians. Then the president went to Brazil and said that we should form a strategic alliance with Brazil. Not a strategic alliance, it's a redistribution of wealth. Oil does one thing. It makes everything on the planet work. Your trains, your trucks, your sewage, your sewing machine, your windmills, our farmers' tractors. The good news is we're exploring ethanol. But at least we have an endless supply of corn, right? No. No, we don't. The next crisis we face, that is going to collide with gas. Next. Over the weekend, leaders from the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, all got together in Washington to discuss their biggest concerns. And topping the list, food prices. The head of the World Bank said this about food prices.
This is the biggest threat today to the world's poor, where we risk losing a generation. We are one shock away from a full-blown crisis.
What could that one shock be? Could it be something like Japan or the Middle East? Could it be, let's say, in the heartland we have tornadoes? What would that one shock be? I'd like them to be a little more specific. And what does it mean, a full-fledged crisis? Whether it's 245 tornadoes in one weekend, or the flooding in Australia, or the fires in the Middle East, or the earthquakes in Japan. It doesn't matter. The world is on edge, and our corn supply is now reaching a 15-year low. The Agricultural Department expects the reserves to drop by 5% of all the corn consumed by our country. That's not good. Ethanol demands aren't helping. They are up to 5 billion bushels, which is 40% of total crops. Gee, food or fuel, which should we do? Should we burn our food? Am I making too much of this? Well, he's the fearmonger, not me. Let me tell you about a conversation I had with a commodities trader when I was in Chicago last week. Next. I was out in Chicago for the day, and I had a chance to talk to a trader at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. Some stunning numbers he threw my way show how high the price of food has risen and could possibly rise. Let me show you the farmland that we have devoted to corn. Here it is. Look at all the U.S. farmers plant 92.2 million acres of corn this year. That is 4 million acres more than we planted last year. Meanwhile, our corn supply is nearing a 15-year low. Well, why is that? Why are we having problems with food? Trader told me that we have 15 to 18 days of grain in our silos. So if there's any kind of disruption in our chain, we're in trouble. But don't worry, because we can always grow more, right? No, we can't. We're committed to ethanol. Look at the regions with ethanol refineries. Here they are. Whoa, look at all of them right there around Chicago, Illinois. Isn't that weird? There are 204 refineries operating and another 9 under construction. Oil refineries? No. Ethanol? Sure. Last year, our country produced 13 billion gallons of ethanol. That's up 800% over a decade. So, here's how our corn usage breaks down. We are expected this year to produce 13.5 billion bushels of corn this year alone. Total ethanol, 5 billion bushels. That's 37% of the total. Total used for food, 1.1 billion. 8.3% of the total. And we're not talking just about corn. The number includes corn syrup, corn and cereal, alcohol, everything. Corn exports, 16%. But don't worry. If the world is hungry, if there's a storm, if there's any kind of disruption, we'll just plant more corn. Oh, no, wait a minute. We can't do that because then gas prices would skyrocket. See, it's back to food or fuel again. I'm seeing a pattern here. It's almost like we're being set up for a lose-lose. One global shock. But the good news is at least we have the geniuses in Washington telling you that you shouldn't even worry about preparing or having a little something extra around the house. Back in a minute. We are going to spend time in this final chapter just talking to you, and we'd like to hear from you on what you think needs to be covered before our next chapter begins. Passover is a holiday that reminds us that God does not forget His people, His children, and the promises that He has made them. He delivers His people from bondage. Passover begins tonight. From New York, good night, America.